cabinet members will now be taken. Councillor Thomas.
Mr. Mayor, I thank Councillor Thomas for his question. There is a very comprehensive response which has been printed, but I would just highlight one part in the fourth paragraph towards the end. It says, for those directly affected, they indicated that they strong support to move towards a contractual arrangement from April 2016. It's my experience of working closely with organisations in the voluntary and community sector to look for sustainability of funding, and most would rather have 3 years guaranteed income, if slightly less, than having to rely on annual grants to allow them to continue.
Supplementary. Is the Cabinet member confident that all of the voluntary sector organisations concerned in Wandsworth, if asked, would express the opinion that the consultation process has been full, as it should be, both in terms of the short-term cuts that have been made, but also in terms of the longer-term strategy?
To keep my answer very brief, Councillor Thomas, yes. But I will expand it slightly. There are two aspects to your question. One is the short term and one is the long term. The purpose of the work we've been doing is to ensure that in the long term we can negotiate with these various organisations to ensure that we get best value for money. And we're obliged under the 1999 regulations, the best value statutory guidance, to make arrangements to secure continuous improvement in the way that in which its functions are exercised with regard to a combination of economy, efficiency and effectiveness, as I'm sure you're aware. But I also have been assured, and I can go into details, that all the organisations which were subject to consultation and referred to the recent Overview and Scrutiny Committee have been engaged in conversations. I don't wish to bore the members here today, but I have chapter and verse here, and I'm happy to share that with Council.
I raise a point of information.
No, I'm not prepared to take any intervention. I'm happy to share that with Councillor Thomas if he would like to see that after the meeting.
Second supplementary.
Yes, Councillor
Does the Cabinet member agree that we should congratulate the Council officers in the Education and Social Services Department for the meticulous way in which they're tackling the challenge of checking that every single penny of taxpayers' money is spent wisely? And they've come up with a significant saving of £42,540 while still maintaining the highest level of services.
Thank Councillor Clay for her supplementary question. Yes, the officers have been working very hard under quite circumstances, and I would congratulate them on the work that they've done. It's not it's not an easy thing to do, to negotiate with people to say that perhaps you need to reduce the amount you're going to get from the council. All the organisations we've spoken to have accepted it. They understand the situation we're in, and they're going to work harder to become more efficient, more effective, and in fact to work smarter.
Councillor Hart.
Question 13 of the Cabinet member.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank Councillor Hart for his question. A very comprehensive response. But I'm grateful for the work that the officers do in working closely with the voluntary community sector, with the CCG. The work they've been doing on the integrated care service has to be applauded, and work also with our open day services for older people, all run through BCS, for providing direct support to the older and vulnerable residents in the borough. And in response to, I would refer members to the printed answer, part B of the question, as it says here, the sun rises in the morning and sets in the evening, and Labour governments put up taxes.
Supplementary. does the Cabinet member agree with me that working with the voluntary sector to look after some of our most vulnerable residents is a priority partnership in Wandsworth? And also, can he be congratulated that he's managed to shield this partnership as far as he can from the impact of the fallout of Labour's mismanagement of the economy when they're in election?
You too. Councillor Madden, yeah, please.
I thank Councillor Hart for his supplementary question. Yes, I think it's very important that we work very closely with the voluntary sector and rely on them for some fantastic work that they do. And I'm pleased to announce within the last few days we've negotiated a grant of £75,000 from the Department of Health to support vulnerable people so that they don't have to go into hospital, that they can help hospital patients get home as soon as possible, and most importantly that they don't have to be readmitted to hospital. It would have been easy to have kept all this money, and the Director of Finance twisted my arm up my back, but I wouldn't give in, and we've decided that this money will be split between a number of voluntary organisations, including the St Michael's Project, the Thursdown Project, Regenerate Rise, Hestia, and the Wandsworth Association for Asian Women.
Second supplementary.
Yeah, no, I thought the Director of Finance was going to intervene. No. Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Does the Cabinet member agree that we should congratulate voluntary sector organisations who get off their own back and raise their own money and provide their own services without always coming cap in hand to the Council? In particular, does he think that the Thursdown Project should be congratulated for having raised over £20,000 on their own to buy themselves a new minibus?
I thank Councillor Clay for her supplementary. Yes, I think the work that the Thursdown Project and the other organisations that I've mentioned, including Regenerate Rise, where I was on Monday with a sustained question and answer session from the attendees at the centre, that the voluntary organisations work very hard and on a daily basis to try and raise this funding, and they should be congratulated.
Councillor Speck.
Question 14 to the Cabinet member.
Thank Councillor Speck for the question. I'm puzzled by the use of the word discounting. We certainly not in any way discount the equality impact assessment that's been carried out. It's been very thorough, and as this response here lays out, there are all sorts of facilities that are either already open, will be open shortly, or next year. And in terms of mitigation, it is very thorough, and we've given a commitment that we will get in touch with every user and explain to them what their options are, and I'm quite confident that almost everybody, if not everybody, will be satisfied that they're in a better position when all of these plans have come to fruition.
No, Councillor Speck, do you?
Yeah, supplementary. I mean, thank you for your answer, but given that many of the present facilities are oversubscribed, particularly at peak times, could not the council members, I know you're talking about talking to the users, but make sure that they really do consult with the individuals and the group, particularly of those groups mentioned in the equality impact assessment, so that we're actually really to have a good idea of what's really needed by those groups to help with future planning, as they weren't actually consulted at all previously before they knew it was going to be shut.
I thank the Councillor for the supplementary question. This consultation business is getting a bit of an old chestnut. It's rather like tooting track. You can't consult on something until it's been approved and been through. And if we try to, you would criticise us, quite rightly. So that's why we haven't consulted in the way that you apparently expect. There will be an enormous net gain of sporting facilities in the vicinity. That is very clear, and I think the position that we will be in, certainly by 2019, but also definitely by early next year, will be better than the position we're in now. So I think everyone can be quite confident that the needs will be fully looked after.
Supplemental, Mr Mayor. Does the Cabinet member agree with me that the proposed use for the Battersea Sports Centre site will actually improve the lives of many people from the groups specified in this question through the redevelopment of the Winstanley estate?
I thank my colleague for that supplementary question. Yes, absolutely. A number of colleagues in their speeches have already touched on that sense of vision, the sense of looking forward, not back, as the leader put it. Emphatically, yes, things will be much, much better in so many ways. And isn't it extraordinary that they're opposing it? But there we are.
Councillor Jane Cooper.
Question 15 to the Cabinet Member for Housing Regeneration.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to thank Councillor Mrs. Cooper for her question. It's very interesting, isn't it, the statistics that get bandied about. Lambeth are getting 40% social housing. Many years ago, the party opposite would fight rather shy of approving anything that Lambeth did, but now it seems to be all the rage. Of course, the reality is very different. We have said all along that we would be delivering 15% affordable housing because we're also delivering other things like the Northern Line, tube stations, the regeneration of the power station itself, a linear park, a new town centre, a school, health centre, various other things like that, all of which cost money. And there obviously has to be a bottom line somewhere. And the more affordable housing you provide, of course, the ultimate payer of that is going to be the people who buy the flats that are not going to be the affordable housing. However, we are delivering 15%, which is what we said we would deliver. On some schemes, we're delivering above that, and I think that is excellent. And I'm sure Twitter will be awash with the statistics there. Lambeth, on the other hand, of course, put their aspiration as 40%. But they haven't delivered anything like that. They're probably around about 18-19%. And indeed, there's one scheme where they managed to deliver 19. Now, you'll say, aha, but on the power station site, you've only delivered 3. Well, that's very true. But of course, the good news, there's another 514 to come. So I expect that will be on Twitter within seconds also.
Supplementary. Could the Cabinet Member give some reassurance that further initiatives will be explored that build on the Council's self-build programme of 57 homes in the opportunity area that will do so much to help meet local housing demand, that initiatives will also be developed to improve the local environment?
I'd like to thank Councillor Mrs. Cooper for her supplementary. Our Council Build programme, which was devised by Councillor Martin Johnson 10 or 12 years ago, has continued. We will shortly be delivering our 250th hidden home, which I'm pleased to say is going to be in my own ward of Balham, where we're having hidden homes in the sky on top of Abbott House, and they will be officially opened in a couple of weeks' time. We certainly have plans afoot for a great deal further rebuild, a new build rather, all over. There's going to be an audit of all council-owned land on our estates to see what we can develop and what we can't develop. And of course, we're also committed to spending a further £20 million in addition to the £50 million that we invest in our estates every year over the next 2 years, a further £20 million. So we are wholeheartedly and completely committed to the regeneration of our estates and for the well-being and the better lives of all our residents.
Question 16 to the Cabinet Member.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. When I read this question, I was reminded of something my law lecturer said to me a long time ago. He said, Jim, he said, never ask a question to which you don't know the answer. And on this basis, and bearing in mind the questioner's previous employment as a Director of Social Services elsewhere in London, albeit an authority not up to Wandsworth standards, I would respond as follows. A consultation cannot in itself make 2 centres viable. In answer to Part B, it is not a statutory requirement. The answer to Part C is this is not the case. And as in Part D, as stated above, the compelling business rationale and the opportunity to deliver a new day service model of delivery, as outlined in the paper, means that merging the existing two sites is the only practical option. And perhaps I'd be interested to know what the party opposite define as a merger. We heard from the leader of the party opposite that Richmond and Wandsworth are merging. But I don't see that as a merger. And yet the questioner in his question says we've taken the decision to close. So what is the difference?
Supplementary, Mr. Mayor. I know I'm not allowed to ask for supplementaries, so I'll only come to one. But if you're a politician, don't answer the question or put the question back to your opponent. The one I'm going to focus on is item B, and that is, did the Cabinet member see what the legal advice was? And he'll know I asked at the Overview and Scrutiny Committee to see the legal advice. Would I also be able to see the legal advice?
I thank Councillor Ambash for his supplementary question. It didn't come to me directly, but I know that you've received an email this evening which outlines quite specifically advice from the Borough Solicitor.
Point of order. The email I received this evening didn't address this question.
I am satisfied with the legal advice, and it is not a statutory requirement.
Second supplementary, Mr. Mayor. Does the Cabinet member agree with me that it beggars belief that Councillor Ambash is advocating such a colossal waste of money? These two centres, running two centres when one is big enough,
Point of personal explanation, Mr. Mayor.
Is costing us more than 470,000. You can't interrupt a question. Shall I start again? Does the Cabinet member agree with me that it beggars belief that Councillor Ambash is advocating such a colossal waste of money, £470,000 a year, according to their amendment later on? Is it perhaps because the Liberal Democrats have got a history of making wild promises, knowing that there's little likelihood that they'll ever have it to deliver them? Oh, sorry, got that wrong. Sorry. Ignore the second half.
Point of personal explanation.
Mr. Mayor, the answer to the question from Councillor Clay, which I thank her for, is no, it doesn't. It doesn't beg a belief as far as I'm concerned. I'm absolutely convinced that the supposition from Councillor Clay is exactly right.
Mr. Mayor, Councillor Ambash was named. He's entitled to a personal explanation.
The point is, Councillor Ambash, you can't come up with a point of explanation in a question. That's the point.
Because you asked the question.
Well, you asked the question. Of course, she was asking, naming you because you'd asked a question. And she herself was putting a question referring to you.
She's misrepresenting what I was saying. True. You read what I was saying.
Move on from that one. Councillor Torrington. Councillor Torrington?
Councillor 17 to the Cabinet member.
I thank Councillor Torrington for the question, which in many senses is very welcome. We've just had, in addition to the figures mentioned here of a fall over a period of years, we've just, in the last few days, had the confirmation of the latest monthly figures on a rolling 12-month basis. It's a further 10%. It's extremely good news. So our position as the safest in the London Borough remains secure, so we should be proud of that. We've worked very hard to get to that position, both with the local police and our own community safety team. And I think it's worth also mentioning, if we cast our minds back 18 months, 2 years or so, the party opposite were absolutely against the local policing model and the provisions of that, and the suggestion that anyone should ever close a police station because it wasn't a good use of resources was just howls of derision. Well, look at it now. Clear falls in crime. They're using their resources, the police that is, using their resources much more efficiently, and it's a very, very good picture. But they opposed it.
Supplementary.
Priority goes to the supplementary from the original question.
Thank you very much. Just to guard against any complacency, we often hear that local police have been abstracted to support a central London need. How can we be sure that local police will remain on local streets as intended?
Well, thank Councillor Torrington, and yes, that's quite right. I mean, of course, never complacent. It's an important question, this. It's something I watch very carefully, is the business of abstractions. There will always be pressure, particularly on an inner London borough, for our officers to be taken into duties in the centre of the city. We have a clear commitment that the dedicated ward officer is never abstracted, barring dire emergency, but the other officers we do have to keep a close eye on. But more encouraging news, the first time in years we have a full complement of policemen in the borough. For some time we carried a shortfall of around about 40 to 50 officers out of a total complement of 600 or so. So that's very good news, and of course that reduces the impact of any abstraction that does take place.
Councillor Jones.
Well, I thank the councillor for the question. I do dislike the sort of insinuation that in any way this is overlooked or not taken seriously, because the opposite is the case. And I didn't mention it. You're quite right. But lots of categories of crime that I didn't mention. We'd be here for half an hour if I went through in the detail of the statistics, which I study very regularly. It is a fact that those crimes have gone up. It's not, though, a Wandsworth-specific thing. It's across London, and we have particularly active strategy to tackle violence against women and girls. We take it very seriously, and as Councillor's colleague, Councillor Cooper, who attends the Safer Neighbourhood Board meetings, which I chair, she will know that that's one of the themes that we tackle. So we take it very seriously. Of course we do.
The time to Cabinet members has now elapsed.